Welcome back to another tutorial. This time we're going to be going over the current culture and invariant culture nodes which exist inside of Logix. The reason we're going over these is because a sort of bug, sort of not bug, I'll explain more as we go, appeared in the bugs and feedback channel relating to this problem of invariant culture and current culture. And so I wanted to talk about it a little bit and show you what you can do to kind of resolve it and what you can do to help us resolve it, because it's like both a bug that you need to fix and a bug that we need to fix. It's a complicated problem. I'll explain it as we go. So to get started over here, inside the Logix node browser, you'll see there's a formatting folder. Inside this formatting folder is the current culture node and invariant culture node. They look like this. And at first sight, there's not really much that you might think about how to use them. If we take current culture, we can pull out our ribbon here and push secondary, and you'll see it currently says ENUS. This will show the current locale that your computer is set to, or the one that is set into in Neos here from the change language button. So if I push change language here, you can see I can choose English or I can choose system default, which will choose the one that the computer is set to. I'm going to go ahead and leave this as English for now. You'll see why in a little bit later. You'll also see that the invariant culture has no output, and that's because the invariant culture represents an absence of culture. What do we mean by culture? So you saw that I just changed the language, but the reason why it's called culture is it also refers to the rules in place for how things like numbers and currency and height and measurements are displayed. And so that's why it's called a culture rather than a language. The nodes which take this culture node are a little bit unclear to start with, but there are any node which has a input of format provider. You can see here that the parse, format, and toString node have this input. All of the string nodes ideally should have this, and I'll be working in subsequent months to try and make sure that that happens so that we can handle this sort of thing a little bit better. If you see a node that doesn't have a format provider and has the problem I'm about to show, please do make an issue on the GitHub. So I can plug them in just like this, and you'll see it works just fine. But what does this mean, and why does it exist? To do that, I'm actually going to show you an example of a little bit of a Logix. It's based on the bug that was reported and talk about what's going on. I am going to give you the opportunity to figure out what's going on. So I'll let you pause the video after I've explained the problem and see if you can figure out what's going on. So if we turn to this setup, you'll see here that I have toString into parse. And so I'm doing toString of 2.5 and parsing it into 2.5, and everything's working correctly. So 2.5 parse 2.5. And it says the second output of parse, which is has it parsed, and it says true. Everything's working here correctly. Great. Let me go back here to my language screen, and I'm going to select Czech, which is the language which Fruxia speaks. And I'm going to go ahead and clear that, and then I'm going to go and update this by pulling out new outputs. And you'll see that this is now changed to not working. You'll see here that 2.5 passed, 2.5 turned into a string and then passed again is now outputting 0 and passed false. Why is this? So I'll give you an opportunity to pause the video if you'd like, and then I'm going to go ahead and explain the problem. So the reason why this is happening is because I am mixing cultures. If we take a look at the input to toString, I have current culture in this one, and I have invariant culture in this one. So in the Czech language and a bunch of other languages that exist around the world, a lot in Europe, Finnish is also another one, I think, but a lot of languages in the world, you'll see something weird when it comes to decimal points. So if I pull out this toString with current culture set, you'll see it says 2, 5. And you might think, hey, that's wrong. It's not wrong. It's just the way that these languages output decimal pointed numbers. If you saw this in the shops, you would be cool. It would make sense. This is just how it was written. Let's say, I don't know, some sort of food that's in the store was €2.50. This is what you would see in a lot of locations. And that's because in those locations, they swap the use of decimal point and comma. So as an example here, if we had an item that was 1,050 euro cents, or 1,000 euros and 50 euro cents, it would be displayed like this. In some places, not all places, it's very, very confusing. It would be displayed like this. That hurt to write because of just the way that I was brought up in my languages, etc. But this is how it would be written in some locations. And that's why this is failing. I'm saying output this toString value in the Czech culture, and then I'm saying parse it in the invariant culture. And the invariant culture expects it to look how you might expect, which is like this. And because it's not formatted like that, this parse node is failing. The correct way to resolve this is to plug invariant culture into toString. And now you see everything works. We get 2.5 out and 2.5 comes back in. Why is this happening? Why does this matter? And what you should do is what we're going to be talking about next. So why is this happening? The reason this is happening is because toString as a node and also format are meant to represent values to a user. And we need to know why you're representing them, which is why there's a culture there. Are you representing it to do machine reading with? In this case, we are. We're taking it out to a string and then back in for machine reading, in which case you should use invariant culture. Or are you taking it out to the user to present it to them finally, like in some piece of UI, in a label, in a form, in something that they're going to read, like a price tag at the store that I mentioned, in which case you should use current culture. The reason behind that being, when a string goes out to the user for a final reason, for display, it needs to be displayed in the rules which they are familiar with and the language that they are familiar with. Just how not everyone in the globe speaks English, not everyone understands these two different number styles. Now, most people that play Nears will, but the reasons that these exist are because, hey, it doesn't apply to everyone, and it also doesn't apply to the entire world, and that's why the underlying language behind Logix here, C#, allows both possibilities so that you can accommodate both possibilities. And in a lot of cases, you won't need to specify this input. If we leave this out as default, so I disconnect this and I disconnect this, it will default to invariant, which means we get 2.5 and we get 2.5 here. But in some cases, we have nodes inside of Logix which don't default to invariant culture, they default to current culture. There is kind of a bug on our point, but it's also potentially a bug on your side when you're using Logix. So wherever possible, I encourage you to plug in invariant culture. If you see oddities, if you see an oddity, plug in invariant culture and let us know on the GitHub. If you don't have an opportunity to plug in invariant culture, also let us know because it's something that we need to address on our side. It may seem like a weird problem, but it exists literally everywhere. To illustrate that, here's a screenshot of some warnings from the Nears codebase, and you'll see here that it's also happening inside C# code. So you'll see this top one here says the behavior of string to lower could vary depending on the current user's locale settings. And they're right. Lowercasing a string can be different on some locales. And so they're saying, hey, please pass in a CultureInfo object to illustrate what culture you would like to lower this string in. So in the equivalent of Logix over here, it's saying, please give us current culture or invariant culture into our toLower call. You'll see the same thing happening here in world.cs, and you'll see the same thing happening here in Common Avatar Builder with the string.endsWith function. So that's what's going on there. I will put some links in the video description that talk about this whole problem inside of C#, and they'll probably explain it a lot better than I can, but that's what you need to do, and that's what's going on. If you ever see a problem here, just make sure invariant culture is plugged in here. Ideally, however, don't do a toString and then a parse. There's no real reason to do a toString and then a parse. Maybe though, places where you might see it are something like a web server where you're getting a web response, or a WebSocket message where you're getting a web response, and the WebSocket or web server is responding in current culture, and then you're passing in invariant culture. That's an example of where that might happen. So again, make sure that you plug in the correct cultures there to get the result that you want. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, please do leave in the video comments, and I'll get back to you.